Hello and welcome to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke, an ongoing conversation about the underlying connections and root causes which shape our lives through various ideas and current events. As we chase after what's true, we continually recalibrate our thoughts and refocus our efforts to engage honestly and graciously with a hostile culture.
It goes on
Sound
and
fair?
on. Yeah.
On and on.
Yeah.
I have never exceeded the four lines.
4 lines.
I've
okay.
never gone into 5, ever.
Commendable.
That fourth line is always long or short somewhere.
Yeah. So,
Well-
Mike, last episode, our cameras malfunctioned, and now we're doing it again.
Yes, we are. But first, today we're going to discuss the Nashville shooter, the manifesto that was leaked today, some things on political projections, and more.
Okay.
But yes, you notice our wide camera. So we had a malfunction last time, and my wife and I watched the whole thing with this single camera and enjoyed it actually more.
Okay.
Enjoyed getting both sides of response to a topic. It was actually enjoyable to watch on a topic, to be hearing and then watch the other person, how they're responding to it. How are they hearing it when are they gathering information? Are they letting the other person talk?
Right.
Are they adjusting their thoughts in response? And
Are they stretching their neck in a weird way?
I actually have a kink in my neck from last night.
How old are we, man? It's all about neck
I'm
pain, right?
on the back side going downhill. Well, hey, let's start out with this question. Did you notice Obama in the news a lot?
He peeked his head in.
3 or 4 days.
What was it about, though?
Well, there's a few things.
Okay.
One, he jumped in with Israel. He
Yeah.
did a written thing.
Right.
He talked about it. Then he did another one of those, yesterday maybe, in which he talked about with Israel again. He says we're all at fault. But the gruesome
right. He
conditions
loves to
of the
do that.
Palestinians, yes, it's horrible what they did. Yes, the response has been significant. But Israel has made an unabiding, he used the word, an unenduring, an impossible situation to abide by.
Yeah.
And we've all been the fault of that. It's basically...
Is he just talking about his drone strike campaigns that were never ending during his
giving
presidency?
$6 billion to Iran. You think that didn't provoke anything?
Yeah, he's at fault for that, too. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I think I saw several people respond to it, and that's one of the things they keyed off on. Well, Mr. Obama, you sure were at fault, and they listed things. But I think that was a little of the right attacking and jumping on things. I think it's more significant. Actually, an on second thought take is nothing to do with Israel. It's him making his presence known.
So is it that Biden is failing so badly that nobody listens to Biden anymore, so he's got to step in?
That's exactly what I think.
Yeah.
Because then he stepped in on another matter. The news is, in my opinion, the news is largely driven by the intelligence community. They have assets in the media.
Yeah.
And at this point, that intelligence community is being led by Mr. Obama, ex-President Obama.
Right.
And so the intelligence community puts out an article, and it was about how Obama is helping guide the Biden administration on IA and the future of IA. IA. What's that?
Internal affairs? I don't know.
Yeah, internal affairs. No, AI.
AI. Yeah, artificial intelligence.
One of the things I noticed when I went and watched back the episode is as I've gotten older, I can still keep my thoughts decent, but I don't remember as quickly, and I mispronounce words.
Yeah, the words don't flow as much.
They don't.
Are we going to end up like Joe Rogan taking all these like nootropic mushroom concoctions right before the show?
Yeah. Golfers take magnesium in their drinks now.
Oh, okay.
Oh, my goodness, I need to take magnesium. Anyway, so he popped up with AI, artificial intelligence, not insemination.
And they're, oh my God. So they're...
he was advising the Biden, that's the thing, like he's come to the rescue. And then there was a final piece. It really wasn't Obama, but it was David Axelrod, one of his close people, making the very strong suggestion that Joe Biden needs to exit the race now. And it's because these recent, did you see the New York Times polls in like 5 of the battle states that Trump is now ahead?
Right.
Which I've always, for several years now, if they have Trump ahead in the polls, that means he's way ahead. If he's behind 5 or 6, that means he's leading by 5 or 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to put 10 points.
So I have the theory, and I was talking about that this week, that Trump being way ahead of DeSantis in these polls. Doesn't make sense. The polls are mixing up. They're saying one thing and then saying another. A lot of people in Iowa are saying DeSantis is going to take it, even though the polls say he's up.
So there was a piece of news supporting you on that. Did you see that? The Iowa
the
governor.
That's right.
I think that's a pretty significant thing when a governor, at this, especially late like this, you got 2 months ago or so, and is it March or they're January? The caucus?
January.
Yeah, 2 months. So the Republican governor endorsed DeSantis.
Yeah, and she's a conservative Republican too. I mean, I always had mixed bag in the past.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see if she will campaign for him, because that'll make a difference,
Yeah.
right? Versus just an announcement.
Yeah, that was the most significant, because I've seen several other pieces of what I would say would be bad news for DeSantis, but I haven't wanted to bring him up to you because I didn't want to like make it adversarial or discouraging. But
just don't talk about the boots.
What do you think about Obama in the news? Any different take on it? Do you think it was meaningful at all? I thought it was meaningful.
I mean, I think it signals
shadow.
what we've been talking about.
I do too.
It's at least supporting evidence. I don't know if you're describing him as leading the intelligence agencies. I could see his hand definitely involved in that.
That's probably a better word.
He's well connected, right? And those legacy, it's all about legacy. Once you're out, you want to control the narrative on into the future. And everything he built, Trump tried to dismantle. And so now he's back for that very reason.
Yeah.
But where does it end? He's not an old guy.
Yeah.
He's going to be around for decades.
I know. That's a very great question. I just read a couple articles on this recently, and one person said he is the second president to have stayed in Washington after his term. The other was Woodrow Wilson, who was also a progressive in his day, but his wife was ailing and she passed away.
I mean, Wilson was also a master manipulator of the narrative.
True.
And
that's true.
Wasn't it Hitler who looked to Woodrow Wilson's administration to learn how to manipulate his population and propagandize?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. Interesting. I just thought it was interesting, Obama in the news. I think things are shaking out and moving, and they're in a process. Well, if you're enjoying the episode, we invite you to stick up with us. We're going to talk a little bit about the Nashville stuff and some projection elements, but you can also click like, subscribe, leave a review, share with a friend. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
Hey, another question before getting that today.
Okay.
Did you see any further stuff on the Matthew Perry?
I saw people emphasizing in fact, we had a commenter talking about his drug addiction, his past history of drug addiction.
Yeah, significant.
Which would, it's not no evidence. Like, that's real.
Yeah, that's
It'll
right.
mess with your heart for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and that's right. And he had...
but he was working hard to be sober for quite a while.
So
That's
my understanding is he'd been sober for 2.5 to 3 years.
Okay.
Before this
So
happened.
not quite a while.
Yeah.
But something.
My also understanding is that he had significant health problems due to his drug use. It was substantial.
Right.
And but no, the article I saw recently that was of interest to me, I read it with interest, was about an interview. He'd done a couple interviews in the last year. He'd written a memoir, and in which he was honest about the drug use. And in the memoir, he also talked about meeting God. He said he had an experience in the presence of God. And he said, I prayed a prayer one day. So he relates this over a course of a couple different interviews, but he goes, I prayed a prayer a long time ago. I asked God to make me famous. He goes, it was a stupid prayer.
Yeah, which God was that?
Well,
yeah.
Oh, which God was that? I wanted to bring something up on that. The spirits. What do you say?
There's a lot of Hollywood stories out there of people praying to other gods to be famous.
So anyway, it goes on though. Then he says it had gotten so bad and whatnot. He said he asked God for help, and it was a real prayer. And he said, the presence of God, I felt like the presence of God came in such a way. He goes, I started crying and shoulder shaking sobs, and I couldn't stop. And God rescued me, he said. And he changed my mind about what's important and about what to live for. So it was not super clear evangelical language, right?
Yeah, right.
But
generic.
It was beyond generic language. It was, maybe that's not true. Maybe it was kind of generic language, but it was loaded with seeming intensity and meaning.
It's cool because I feel like a lot of, especially famous people that want to talk about their faith, they'll often say things like the universe, instead of God. And there's no difference except to say it's impersonal and doesn't have any moral requirements.
Yeah.
You know, the universe wanted this or that. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
give me
That's
a
Jim
break.
Carrey. Yeah.
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 So it's something. If
yeah.
just the fact that he's
I
talking
know.
about God as a personal being.
Yeah. And who he made commitments to and who changed things in him, he said.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that was pretty encouraging. I don't know, on the same lines, if you read the article. Well, here's a good point, a question asked. Kat, the tattoo artist lady, Kat Von, whatever her name is.
I just little glimpses of
She
something.
became a Christian.
Why is she famous?
She's a famous tattoo artist in L.A.
Okay, was she on like a reality show?
Yeah, she
or
had a
something?
reality show
I
as well.
see, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, I didn't even
And then
recognize
she
her.
moved, left L.A.
I saw her get
didn't wanna
baptized.
raise kids.
And I thought, oh, look at that person with tattoos getting baptized. All right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things I've noticed is, and I think this is a bad thing. I don't know. You tell me if you think it's a bad thing.
Okay.
As Christians, the excitement we have when a famous person becomes a Christian,
You're right. Yeah.
I think it's unhealthy. I think it shows we somehow think, oh, if really famous people were Christians, we'd all be, it'd be better.
Well, and I was just thinking about
It's
that
the
this week.
opposite of God's strategy, who said, how many wise people, how many noble ones have been called?
Not so many, right?
It's the morons of the world. That's literally what Greek says. It's the foolish ones is morons, the Greek word morons.
I'm going to use that.
Yeah, I know.
Next time I preach.
I know. We're a bunch
Look at
of
us morons. Yeah,
I know.
that's good.
And he just says, and it's Peter's argument as well, which are the ones taking you to court?
Yeah, which
Doing
one are the
this
ones
great
persecuting us?
injustice. So what do you think? Do you think it's a good sign or a
Well,
bad sign?
I don't think it's any sign at all.
Oh.
But I have noticed, I was thinking about that this week, that what does it mean really when you idolize somebody? Like when you're making an idol out of something or someone, how do you know? And I was looking at the story of Rachel and Leah, both married to Jacob in Genesis 29 and 30, and they're having kids, and they're just jealousy, just overflowing, and they're naming their kids terrible names out to express their jealousy and pain.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty shocking. Are they making an idol out of the love and affection and attention of their husbands? Are they making an idol out of having children?
Yeah, and what it meant in the culture. I personally think so.
Or is it that God made us to love and be loved, and when it's missing, our hearts break? And that's
Okay,
not idolatry. And so when do you know?
So wait, so
When do you know when it
idolatry
is?
not a false affectation, it's a disproportionate.
But isn't it a sliding scale? That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
it
How
is
can
a
you know
sliding
when
scale.
you're in idolatry if you've
Well,
defined
by
it so loosely?
your response patterns.
Okay, so that's what I was looking at, and that's where it connects to the celebrities, because when you make an idol out of your pastor, and then he has some sin or fault,
Yes,
whether
that's right.
catastrophic or minor,
That's another
even,
one.
it's all of your hope turns instantly to
Yes,
rage,
That's right.
right? And I see
devastating.
people do that with celebrities too,
Yeah, I agree.
and I think that's a signal.
Yeah, I do too. And I also think it's a signal when we hear somebody was translated from a kingdom of darkness and destruction to a kingdom of light, and we're happier when it's a famous person than someone we've never heard of.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing. I don't think.
I did ponder on the parallels between Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Each of their wives struggled with fertility. Abraham prays, receives a promise from God. I don't know that he even started praying, but he consistently held on to faith. Isaac went and prayed when his wife wasn't having kids. And then Jacob just says, I'm not God. What do you want me to do? It's like, dang, man, you kind of messed that up. It was an opportunity.
Yeah.
But in the midst of all that chaos and deceit, it's hard to have too much. It's hard for me to be harsh on anybody that was going through all that.
Yeah, and it's a different time. It's a different time. It's difficult for us to enter into a time that's so substantially different than us. If you think about this, having a family was survival.
Yeah.
In that time, you didn't have many kids. You were difficult to survive.
Although those characters in the Bible are pretty wealthy. They've got servants. They've got
immensely
extensive
wealthy.
property. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Hey, tell me about, you had a note here on the New York mayor, Eric Adams.
So the governor of Texas and the governor of Florida, both famously, are sending illegal immigrants to New York City. They're not sending, they're offering them rides. And the immigrants take them because that's where they want to go, some of them.
Well, and if you're an immigrant, I would imagine one shocker could be, it's kind of swamped down here.
Yeah, no kidding. So Eric Adams, mayor of New York, has been pushing back, saying this is untenable. We can't manage this, and it's something like what, South Texas or Arizona receive cross the border a day.
Yeah.
That they've had it in 6 months to a year.
Yep.
At any rate, Eric Adams had a scheduled meeting to go to the White House and talk to Biden and say, look, we got to close this border. Like, we got to do something. And the same day of that meeting, the New York mayor's largest campaign donor got a visit from the FBI with warrants to search his properties, his belongings.
It's just coincidence, right?
I'm sure it's unrelated, but the flex there seems pretty blatant.
Yeah.
But again, it's the same three-letter agencies. It's the
Yeah.
intelligence apparatus saying it's our agenda.
Now, how do you square that with the Biden administration having made statements, we're going to go ahead and build the border wall? They've made about 2 or 3 different times public statements that something we've got to stop this. We've got to change this.
Yeah.
How do you?
I call that early campaign
Yeah,
lies. Yeah.
that's fair.
Because they're going to say, well, we've been working on it for a year, but by the time the election rolls
Well,
around.
one of the things I was thinking about, I had not heard that story about that. I had heard about Matt Taibbi. Did I say that one right?
Yep.
Taibbi, he was investigated by the IRS. They knocked on his door while he's at Congress doing testimony.
Wow. Yeah.
Anyway, I had not heard about the Eric Adams, but what it does make me think is how difficult a position the Biden administration must be in. If you and I tend to agree, though we lack evidence, not being insiders, but if Mr. Obama runs 51% of the administration, and he could have sicked an agency on Eric Adams and let Biden face the request.
That's right. Yeah.
That'd be a tough spot to be in.
Well, and I think his sin is not so much saying we got to close down the border. I think Biden understands that there's, you can reach your limit even of what they're doing. I think his sin was breaking ranks publicly. If you've got this apparatus with authoritarian tendencies, the number one thing you don't do is be disloyal.
Yes.
That's your number one
That's true.
sin.
Pelosi was good at that in the House as well.
Yeah, that's how power-hungry people work.
I have noticed that, though. Did you notice the AOC, the whole thing, until the Hamas stuff started coming up, how quiet they had been for a season?
Oh, yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well,
You think they've been
I'll say what I think it is, but it's not pleasant.
captured, intellectually brought to heel?
No. But my thing is without evidence.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's possible that it's because Hakeem Jeffries is also Muslim, as they are.
Okay.
So it's one thing for them to buck against American leadership.
Oh, Hakeem Jeffries is the minority leader in the House.
That's right. He's
Okay.
their boss now.
Yeah.
And so how much of the Muslim male-female component
The
now
patriarchal.
comes a part of it?
Yeah. Interesting.
You can buck against the evil men in the West, but you're not bucking against any Muslim man.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some social pressure there.
So I have no evidence for that. It was just when I noticed it, wow, I haven't seen him.
As soon as that
Why is
transition
that?
happened. So
I thought, I wonder.
that is the giant contradiction that leftists
that's
who
right.
want strong, independent women
Yeah,
suddenly now also want the Islamic State.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Speaking of, and then we're going to go to Nashville. Did you see the article on the quoting the Muslim guy in Germany?
No, I did not.
On air camera. What do you think about the Arabs, these Muslim people coming to Germany? It's great. Do you think Germany should have Sharia law? He says, as soon as we get 51% majority, we're going to force it.
Yeah, right. It's
What do you mean force it? Well, we're in the majority. That's what it's going to be.
it's almost like they had a plan.
Almost
Who
like
would have
there's a
thought?
plan. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how you get a new crusade,
Yeah, that's right.
right? The
That's
problem
true.
is, and I saw somebody post that, and I thought, yeah, you can't have a crusade if there's no Christians to fight it. You're going to have some pagan Westerners fighting the pagan Middle Easterners.
Yeah.
That's not a crusade.
Well, just because we're going to go to Nashville, but one more thing on this. The thing, though, is about leftism. The BLM and Antifa, they are functionally in the same vein as Islam. It's authoritarian power,
Right.
right? It's dominance.
And the dominance, you can tell the dominance is the primary thing because suddenly the BLM narrative doesn't matter anymore, right? Even the communist narrative of victim and oppressor, it almost doesn't apply. It's just like, no, whatever it takes to get power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although
that's
they
right.
definitely, I say that, but then I think, no, there's definitely an oppressor narrative with Israel,
Yeah.
but it's power at any means.
Okay.
All right.
Nashville. Leaked today.
Yep.
Did you see
Steven
it?
Crowder.
Did you-
I did. Scribbles in a notebook.
What do you think?
So
Did
for
you read
those,
through it?
we should fill people in, not because it is getting censored. It's censored on Facebook. It's censored
Oh,
on
is
Google.
it? I didn't know
The
that.
searches are not coming up with anything.
Oh.
But there's
know that.
photos of a notebook where
So
the
3
shooter
pages of her notebook,
the Covenant School.
of which my understanding is there's hundreds of pages.
I didn't know that. Yeah, but
So
I'm sure
only 3 have been leaked.
the 3 rantings go a while. But these 3 were quite specific.
They were.
It was a schedule of events, plans.
It was
the
things
day
about
of
that day. Yeah.
where she's talking about how she's going to go kill these white crackers.
Yeah.
Yeah, really racially focused. White privilege was a phrase thrown in there.
And money. Yeah.
Yeah, that they're rich. Yeah,
Yeah.
But the white, I don't know, 5-6 times got mentioned just on the page I looked at.
Yep.
It's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
You know, because we initially thought the first narrative was we thought it would be all about the trans issue. This
Yeah.
girl was saying she was transitioning to be a male and getting counseling from the pastor of the church where this school is. She graduated from that school,
Yeah.
but that didn't get mentioned much.
No.
In fact, and pardon my language,
Not
but
at all.
she was calling the kids the white faggots.
Yeah. I saw that.
I was like, what is, I don't know exactly understand, but I don't know that she was understanding even
Yeah.
what she's doing at
Couple
that
times
point. When
said
you're
that
that
way.
close to
Yeah.
that level of death and evil,
Yeah.
your thinking doesn't stay straight anymore.
That's probably true.
I'm convinced.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the demons are loud.
Yeah. So I was struck by this is going to be, I agree with what you said, but I was also struck by what's so big about this? Why would this need to be hidden? What's
Why was the FBI hiding it?
it's yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think, and so let's go to the question of why does the DOJ FBI hide this? Because I think what we were under the impression, because I don't know if you remember, we talked about this several weeks ago, and we both agreed that the reality is we don't know what's in it. And there could be things that are actually not helpful. It's not good to highlight mass murder.
Right.
There's some reasons to limit things at times that are appropriate, and there's some reasons to put them out. And the reality was, unless we knew what's there, there's no reason to say they should be or shouldn't be. We have to kind of leave it to the wisdom of people who see what it is.
Yeah.
And so we were assuming that it's being held back because it would be damaging in some way for the public to know.
Well, it's well regarded as a motivating factor of all mass shooters is fame,
Yeah.
infamy.
Yeah.
And so the Daily Wire and some other news agencies refuse to post the names
Yeah.
of mass shooters.
Yeah. I think that's wise.
So is publishing this manifesto contributing
Yes.
to that, right?
That's the que-
That
that was
other
the
people are
question.
seeing, oh, look at all the hate.
Right.
Look at all the feeling that's getting
Right.
stirred up,
Right.
which is the part of the craving. I want to destroy.
right.
I want to hurt people.
But I actually didn't see anything that was like shocking in the way, like, why couldn't this have been published? So my question is, why do you think the DOJ and the FBI were withholding it?
Well, the whole critical race theory verbiage was throughout the sections we saw. Mm-hmm. So if that's a central part of what they're promoting as a social.
Well, say that in a different way. Say it without saying critical race theory.
Well, so critical theory is a method for looking at law and history that says the outcomes that we find, right, where one group gains advantage over another, let's assume they're intentional, right? If white people are on average more successful in society in positions of power, maybe that means society is constructed that way to achieve that end. It's not coincidental, or it's not just that they're the majority, even though that's the most obvious answer. And so you begin criticizing or looking critically at everything in this dynamic of power. And so critical race theory was when you focus on race, but there's critical gender theory, queer theory, I think it's most often called, and others. So the phrases like white privilege, which was throughout her manifesto, are sourced from that. That's where they originate. And it's all around intersectionality. And, there's a bunch of different kind of like concepts that get taught at these DEI sessions.
So what we're speculating is that because they didn't want to release these things,
yeah.
and in the innocence of looking for reasons, you assume, well, maybe there's something that would be unhealthy. Okay. But the problem is that they were soft selling the idea that this was somebody on the right? There's this presentation that this was a MAGA supporter.
The
somehow,
shooter. Yeah, I never heard that.
related. Yeah, I did.
Because the day of, it was like, oh, a trans
Yeah, I heard
girl
that too.
shoots people up.
Right. So what I'm saying is that I think that the reason it's withheld is because this is clearly not, there is no other spin for this other than, let's use the word you've been mentioning 2 times in a row, we're going to keep using it, brainwashing.
Yeah.
There's brainwashing going on. And you can see the language in there, and it's from the left. It's this woke, privilege,
Yeah.
critical race theory, critical things that's destructive of society.
Right.
We have to dismantle, tear down, and put it back up. It's the same message, and which is one of the points you were making with brainwashing. It's the same message as communism, Marxism. You tear it down so everyone's equal, but that's not what happens. The people who tear it down are the new power brokers.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with woke as well.
Right.
So BLM, we're going to tear it down. Antifa, we're going to tear it down. But no, it's so that we might get enriched and become the power brokers.
Right.
And
Get our revenge.
Yes, that's right.
Make no mistake. Revenge is on the menu whenever you tear down like that.
Yeah, that's right.
I think there's a spinning factor to every political narrative, right? This is our narrative of we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. And so when a story like this comes out, if you can keep it ambiguous at all, if you can make mystery to the motive, it's going to help your story. It's going to help the narrative perpetuate.
Yeah.
So all of this coming out really puts another nail in the coffin of the DEI, what's the corporate one, right? Where the corporations
ESG?
get points, yeah. Which is really passing away and getting kind of mocked into oblivion at
I
this
think
point.
it's being hidden. I don't think it's passing away personally.
Well,
I think the
but what's
language
happening
being
is there's a
taken away.
resurgence of people in the public conversation mocking it, including
And there are
people like-
states that have said, we're not going to, you're using this, we're not going to use you for our state
for
finances.
the retirement funds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that was kind of a blow, but I think it's just going underground. But
Well, but underground is where it belongs, right? Because when it's out in the open,
well,
and they can pull strings and say, no, now you have to follow along. Like if you're, that means it's in retreat.
okay, I hear what you're saying on that. I can see that, but let me push back and ask you a question. The discussion we had last week about brainwashing is because Marxism, communism has gone underground and the words don't have meaning anymore. So when we say brainwashing, we're actually talking about what is Marxist theology,
Right.
what is communism, but that doesn't resonate anymore. It's gone underground from there. So in one sense, you could say, is that a victory because they won't claim communism now and Marxism? Okay, possible, but it's also, it is more devious.
Yeah, but we want devious things to be afraid of the light.
That's true.
I think that's a gain. That's a gain. It's
Yeah.
not a success complete, for sure.
Yeah.
But ideologies, you can't just defeat
Okay.
them. Right? They
I
don't
hear
fade
what you're
away.
saying there.
I think you see that with, I've heard Christians talk about, well, we'd rather the sin out in the open than in private and hidden. I think, no, you don't. Because when sin is out in the open and people are unashamed, then your kids are going to start doing it because what's wrong with that? Everybody does it. But at least when it's hidden, and there's a little shame added on it, it creates a
Yeah.
block from people to dive in to things
Yeah.
that will destroy them.
Yeah. Before we go to projection, let me ask one more question on this,
Yeah.
on the shooter here. Brainwash. So that was mentioned in some of the articles I read about it, that this girl communicates in such a way that it's out there, Looney Tunes. What's the
Okay.
difference between, or is there a difference between brainwashed and woke? Do you think there's a difference?
Well, it depends if you're talking to someone deep into it.
Well, the way we've talked
teacher or
about
a
it the
student.
last couple times, as a better way to talk about what's happening that grabs people's attention.
When I think of
think it's-
brainwashing, I think when you talk to your everyday person and they're just giving back the words they were given at their training, they're just brainwashed. They're not thinking. They just think, oh, when I say these words, it means I'm okay. And I've seen a great example of it where, a black guy was talking to a white liberal, and the white liberal just starts saying all the words that are supposed to mean he's a good guy. I'm with you, I'm an ally, and all these things. And the black guy asks him just some surface level questions like, why? Why are you this? Why that? And the guy just doesn't even know.
Yeah,
He's never thought
yeah,
to second
yeah,
thought.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to quote our own name here, but I think that's the brainwashing, is when you just have words and you don't even think twice about what they mean.
So would you say that woke would be a category bigger than brainwash? Some that are woke, it's a brainwashing, and some, they know the tear down they're doing. They've thought through. They have reasons.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's agendas.
Would you say?
I mean, I think
brainwashed
Christians
don't-
have been brainwashed. There are Christians who just, whenever you have a really straightforward, like, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys mentality about life, I would call that a form of brainwashing, right? Sometimes you hear it calling ideological capture, that you just have this narrative that runs everything now, and you just plug it into every problem, and there's the solution. It's never my fault.
Yeah, that's true. My hesitation would be there, while I agree with you, is I would like to preserve the idea of brainwashed as a new code word for crazy liberal. They don't know the Marxism that they're drinking from. You know what I'm saying? Because and your argument was, which I
Yeah,
thought
but then
was a
you're
good
not
one.
using it as it is.
Well, no, you're reserving it for, it's a hammer you're reserving for certain situations.
Okay.
Not all situations.
I mean,
'Cause
it's not
then
a common word I use anyway.
Yeah.
Right. But I can think of like people who are flat earthers. Like, oh, there's an element of brainwashing going on there. Somebody convinced you of something. That kind of
But
mind
you could
virus.
say that for everything, because any place we're deceived about something, you could say we're brainwashed. I mean, there is an adversary. There is a battle for our minds.
Yeah, that's true.
for what's
That's true.
true.
And I would take back the flat earthers because brainwashing implies an authoritarian
Yes, I agree.
control, right? Someone deliberately brainwashed you.
Yeah.
You're part of a...
And see, I also think that when we're talking about it, where our conversation was last time was about especially younger people hearing things and they have no idea. They've never thought about it at all, and they don't even know what Marxism, and the eyes glaze over if you say, well, that's really communism. You know that, right? And they don't know anything about it. And part of it is their youth, and the reality is that is more brainwashing that's taken place.
So in education, they talk about the Piaget, I believe, was one of the researchers on developmental milestones. And he talks about, in his research, and shows a lot of effectiveness in educating with this in mind, that kids who are in the kind of middle school years, and I think from 4th grade to about 7th grade, they have a very concrete black and white way of looking at the world, especially around moral questions. That's the age when a lot of people become Christian or don't. It's the age when a lot of people become communist or don't. And so if you can tell someone in that age group a narrative about this big, complicated, terrible world and how you're going to be the one who fixes it because you're the good guys and they're the bad guys. And some middle schoolers will just latch onto it and they become obsessed. And that's how you get high school and college age activists. But when you meet those activists, often you talk to them and they talk like a middle schooler because they haven't been thinking about it and maturing their understanding of how complex the world really is. And, like, what are the consequences of shutting down all industry for a perceived gain in 0.5 Celsius, global temperature averages, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I've seen the same thing among adults who I knew growing up were Christian and then walked away from their faith. And when you talk to them about Christianity, they use all these phrases from middle school.
Yeah.
To talk bad about Christianity as if that's all it is, right?
Yeah.
It's like you didn't grow up in this. You got stuck.
Don't you think at that age, I don't know if Piaget talked about this or not, but there's this component, the imagery of a little girl trying on her mother's high heels.
Okay.
And it happens with boys, just not with high heels, but it's not
sometimes that
supposed
too.
to. But the point being, there is an age in which they simply want to be like mom and dad. And they're putting mom and dad's clothes in, and it doesn't fit.
Yeah, you're playing
They don't
house.
know what it means. They're playing house.
Yeah.
But they are adopting sentiments without knowing any of the content, having to wrestle through anything. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, given that age.
Yeah.
It's the age that follows that in the whole classical stuff, in which logic is being able to be taught then in those first high school years, and rhetoric, and being able to now be pressed for what are the reasons for these things that have been put on these clothes,
Right.
Explain them. And if it doesn't fit and if it's inappropriate, well, what would it take to modify them, etc. So to me, it seems like it's an appropriate time frame, but then when it's handled with ill intent, it's destructive.
Well, and that's where when high schools fail, that's I think what we're describing is okay. You told them this moral moralizing tale of how the world is and should be. Now, in high school and college, you wrestle.
Yes, right.
You wrestle with the ideas.
That's right.
Versus now we have to shelter them to maintain what we've built in the middle school.
Yes, that's
naive.
That's exactly right.
Naivete. Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, projection. Let's go. You had a thought on projection, and we'll tie it to the Nashville narrative in a moment. But what's your point on projection?
So James Lindsay is a well-known atheist, not really conservative. He's a mathematician who became an anti-woke activist.
Okay.
And he has a phrase that I adopted called the iron law of woke projection. But I'm trying to step away from the woke thing. It feels dated and it feels like a tired phrase. Word.
I like it.
I know you do. Yeah.
I think it feels victorious because they're running from it.
They are. But so I phrase it as the iron law of authoritarian projection because I think that's the defining characteristic is not that you're woke, but that you're authoritarian. That's when I have a problem. People who are compassionate for those who are less fortunate. That's incredible. Keep it up. At any rate, the authoritarian projection is that everything that they accuse you of doing, they are currently or will soon be doing themselves.
Yeah.
And so the crazy thing, and the best recent example, is they've been calling conservatives Nazis for years, right? Trump is Hitler, on and on and on.
Bush was Hitler.
Yeah, that's right. Bush was Hitler. And now suddenly, they're
McCain.
literally calling for gassing the Jews.
Yeah.
The same people.
Yeah.
It's like they can't, and there's no, they don't even see the contradiction. And so here's my thought. If that's the case, if everything they say we're doing, they're about to do, because there was articles coming out this week, 2 of them, saying that MAGA Republicans, right, conservative Christians, and actually I think Christian nationalists was the phrase they used, are worse than Hamas.
That phrase got drawn out when Mike Johnson got put in.
Yeah.
But I saw a number of articles that ran to that word, Christian nationalist.
Yeah, they love it.
Yeah.
And that word or that term,
That they're Nazis.
It originated as a slander against conservatives.
Yeah.
And then people like me said, "Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds right. I'll just take it." But yeah, if that's the case, if now they're saying the Christian nationalists are worse than Hamas, and I think worse than Hamas.
Yeah, I saw
more
that. More dangerous and threatening for our country.
And I saw multiple BLM activists, which is
Do you think people believe that?
So here's what I saw. I saw BLM people openly saying, "I wish that we were doing that in America, what Hamas did to Israel. I wish we were going door to door in the white neighborhoods killing people." And I think this manifesto plays into that. It stokes that same thing. And it's crazy to me. I don't, I'm not trying to make a prediction, but I see a pattern. And it's shocking.
I agree with you. 2 things. One, looking backward, the Russia collusion narrative was complete 100% projection because I believe
Hillary was literally colluding with Russia.
Colluded with Russia
to make the dossier.
That's
yeah,
right.
It's true.
That's right. Looking forward, I agree with you. I think that I read a couple articles once that talked about some things, like when Trump was arrested, for example. Don't drive here from all over the states and make a scene. Because that's what they want. They want any excuse to bring out the AR-15s that they own and shoot down,
Well, and to bring out their feds into the crowd to try to stoke the same stuff.
That's right, yeah.
So I think there's an important difference between projection, which is a subconscious act of putting your own corruption onto others, and gaslighting, which is another phrase you hear a lot, or word you hear a lot, term thrown at political opponents. Gaslighting is where you deliberately say, "No, it's not me, it's you," when you know full well it is me, right? They actually play out the same. And I think it comes back to what we were talking about, the difference between those who are brainwashed and those who are deliberately stoking violence.
Well, and then
unrest.
there's another one that is very similar to that, which I've come to conclude that the January 6th was a false flag operation.
Okay.
A false flag operation is when the military or an intelligence agency creates a scenario in which the people they're fighting against, they make it seem like they've done something bad so that everyone turns against them.
Right.
And
It
that's
justifies
exactly
the overreaction.
that it justifies that reaction. But they generated that response, and it's not true even. And that's exactly, it was not an insurrection that took place. In fact, there was more, I think it was a legitimate point, there was more that took place under the Hamas people breaking into the Capitol that was riotous.
Yeah.
You've said, what have you said? Did you say riot but not insurrection, or did you say something?
Jan
but not-
6,
Yeah.
J6. Yeah, it was a riot for sure. It was a
Right.
riot.
There was
Yeah.
a lot of people, yeah.
And there were questionable people in the midst of it
Yes.
as well.
That's right.
Yeah, on the J6 stuff, more evidence came out, and I mentioned this a week or two ago, but now the videos are coming out showing the perjury that Pelosi's staff, her security staff, perjured themselves in the January 6 trials, claiming that the Oath Keepers were stoking this kind of violent confrontation with police when those guys weren't even there.
Yeah.
They were saying they were there.
Yeah.
They saw it happen,
Yeah.
and they were in a completely other building for the whole time.
Yeah. So the projection, the Nashville, there's projection going on there? You think?
I'm not sure.
I do, and here's why. I think that they know, I think the left knows what it breeds. And when when things happen, the Covington kid shooting, there's lots of them. I think they actually know, and I don't know what you think about this. We've never talked about, what was the black guy that was killed up in Minnesota?
George Floyd.
George Floyd.
Yeah.
I personally don't think it was a murder. I don't think he was killed. I think they did everything as a police officer.
Well, there's no
they were
belief.
told to do.
There's no belief necessary. The medical examiners clearly stated there was no damage.
That's right.
There's no
I forgot.
suffocation.
Did we talk about that?
It came out like 2 weeks ago, right?
Somebody is suing, a leftist is suing somebody, and in the process of discovery, part of her suit quotes the doctor who had communicated to her the real findings that there was no murder,
Right.
there's no asphyxiation, there was no damage to the neck, and it's like a bombshell in a whole nother setting.
Right. And Derek
any
Chauvin
case,
pays the price.
I think that's projection. What the projection is on the shooter front is that these are the radical right people who do these things. They kill people, they shoot up people, they make these mass shootings. It's not that there couldn't be somebody from the right that has done things like that. I'm sure that there are people that have happened.
Who actually believes that, though?
Well, that was my question you just a minute ago. Do you think they actually believe this?
And this is maybe my disconnect from the liberals, even in our own state, because I've heard the federal government talking about the dangers of white supremacy and the dangers of
all that.
militias
That's right.
forming everywhere, but they're not. And they're claiming all this violence in their statistics, but it's all prison violence, right? There's lots of white supremacists in prison.
The right, by and large, are not violent.
But who's afraid of them?
Yeah.
The right is well armed.
Because they hunt, they live in
Well,
agricultural settings.
they also prep for the apocalypse.
Yeah, that's right. I think the Nashville thing is projection because what they is combined though with the gaslighting, because they knew it was one of their own. The evidence shows it's one of their own. They think the right do the same things, and so they accuse them of what they know that they do. But the problem is the right doesn't. Here's the thing: the right is semi-neutral. Maybe we'd say a mass shooter could be a person who's conservative in their political things. That's human nature is corrupt everywhere.
Yeah.
But they say, no, it's not from the left. And the truth is, it's hardly ever a person on the right. It's hardly ever.
Well, a classical conservative, an American conservative, is always going to be focusing on personal responsibility. And the narrative inside the head of a mass shooter is it's everything is their fault. All my pain is their fault, and I'm going to make them pay.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't ever
Yeah.
be focused on personal responsibility and individual liberty and then blame everyone else and try to destroy them.
Yeah.
You just can't. You can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So let me get back to something you said there. MAGAs are Nazis.
I didn't say it.
No, you're saying that's the projection from the left.
Correct, yeah.
That's a trajectory. Where do you think that's aimed?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I think the manifesto lays out, is the trajectory they want, which is an outbreak of Hamas style. Not people losing their mind and breaking with reality and attacking kids in schools, but a deliberate, orchestrated attack.
Now, that would be separate from the gun control issue, because I've long believed that the left likes mass shootings because it helps them in their
Stokes
minds
their gun
get
control
closer to
narrative.
gun control narratives.
Right.
But what you're saying is no, it's more. There's more than that, and that is potentially there is beating in the heart. Well, Nazism destroys its opponents, wipes them out,
It's authoritarian.
eradicates them.
Right.
And what you're saying is, if this is true, the question is the secret heart of the left, especially the progressive left, we'll call it that, right?
Okay.
It's not the Barry Weiss, Greenwald, it's not these old line liberals, but the progressive left, what's buried down there? Nazism that would like to destroy the right and Christians.
Well, no matter how radical your Nazism, right? No matter how white supremacist you are, Hitler will always make backroom deals with Stalin. Authoritarians know each other when they see them.
Well, we made a backroom deal with Stalin too.
Well, we made an out in the open deal with
Okay,
Stalin.
a front room deal.
Yeah, to say, look, we got to stop. But Stalin joined us because Hitler turned on him. He wouldn't have.
Yeah.
He was letting him run rampant.
I know, that's true. Okay, let me make a point based on something you just said. It's going to be, I think you're going to agree with it, but you might not think it was wise for me to say it. I don't know.
Okay.
The whole sea, the chants from is the sea to the whatever, Israel.
From the river to the sea.
From the river to the sea.
Yeah.
Okay. So when people chant that, they are talking about the eradication of Israel.
Clearly.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. That's anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
There's no other way. Logic wouldn't be logic if it's not anti-Semitic. If you
I would
wanted
say
to destroy a people group.
There's a lot of middle schoolers saying it and don't think they convince themselves they're not
this
anti-Semitic.
This is where I'm going to go with this.
Right. This is where the brainwashing begins.
I wasn't going to go with the phrase. Now I'm going to take a separate group. They don't. If you're chanting that phrase and you have anywhere close to an adult mind, you are, by definition, you might deny you're an anti-Semite, but you want to destroy a people group. You're anti that people group.
Right, and it's as if they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right.
Now,
Where are the Jews going to go?
However, here's what I want to say, because I've seen a couple articles in the last couple of days, the charge of anti-Semitism for anybody who doesn't want Israel to keep killing, thinks that Israel has done enough in proportion.
Ceasefire.
Yeah, ceasefire. And when there are different kinds of ceasefire, let's say ceasefire proponents. There's ceasefire proponents, and then they're chanting from the sea to whatever. Okay. But then there's other ceasefire people who are talking about there are people in Palestinians, and we're going to have to admit there's got to be Palestinians that would prefer Hamas not be in their area.
Yeah, for sure.
And they could get killed in this, and that's not a good thing.
Right.
There are also people who are saying it in terms of Israel, have they done enough in proportion to what's happened? And that's a question we talked about on another thing too.
Yeah, I think it's a
But
crazy idea.
That's fine, but it's okay if they had a different endpoint than you might have, right? What's enough if you
What's their
differ on
limit?
what's enough?
Yeah.
But here's what I was thinking. I saw a couple articles, conservative commentators charge them with anti-Semitism.
Okay.
And I thought, that's not fair, that's not right.
It's
Just because you want a ceasefire doesn't mean you're anti-Semite. It doesn't mean you want Israel to be eradicated.
But you can be an anti-Semite and not want Israel
Oh,
eradicated.
totally. You can be eradicated. Yes,
Yeah.
that's completely
I feel
true
like
too.
there's a
I'm just saying it almost is like if you support. So I'll give an illustration. I didn't read this article about what Angelina Jolie said. She's in support of the Palestinian people. Okay, her father.
I'm laughing because I don't care what Angelina Jolie said.
Well, it was interesting because her father gets online. Here, I almost brought it up earlier when we were talking about Matt Perry and the pop culture stuff, but because her dad publicly chastised a little bit, who she's a grown. He says it's so disappointing that my daughter doesn't support Israel, something like that,
Okay.
right?
And what did she say?
I didn't read exactly, except that she wants a ceasefire
Something
and
like
she
that.
doesn't want innocent people being killed in Palestinians. Now,
Right.
so let's just leave it at that. If that's all it is, that's inappropriate to charge her with anti-Semitism. Now, she could be for other reasons, and we don't even know it, right?
Sure.
But just because you don't want this war to keep going doesn't mean you're from the sea to the river, wipe them out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you could make the argument that anyone calling for a ceasefire now is being influenced by anti-Semites.
maybe it's not the wisest.
Here's what I mean. Here's what I mean.
hear what you're saying.
Right? After 9/11, we went to Afghanistan pretty quick. Nobody was calling within a month, and it hasn't even, it's just been a month.
I hear what you're
Nobody's
saying.
calling for us to leave Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you guys, you
let's
did
do
it.
this. Yeah.
You got your
I hear what
ounce
you're
of flesh. Get out now.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Could I offer an alternative to that? See
No.
what you hear.
No. I'm the final word.
I was thinking about that exact thing because you're right. By the ceasefire and its quickness, here's the thing. The left likes the Palestinian narrative.
Because it's an oppression.
It is.
Yeah.
They like that. That's what they're geared towards. It aligns with Antifa, it aligns with BLM, it aligns with all this other stuff. Some of that is to the degree that wipe out Israel.
Right.
That's anti-Semitism. But I don't think it has to go to that degree.
Well, could it be like saying if you were the one chanting Black Lives Matter, that means you hate white people?
Okay, great.
Is that what
point.
you're trying to do?
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you on
I think
that.
some of them do.
There
and
certainly
I think
isn't in the
there is
midst.
racism, but just because you're caught up in something, you can be caught up in a BLM stuff. And I think I've known people who were supportive because they feel like there's still quite a bit of room to grow for race relations, let's say, in America. And so, but that they're not anti-white.
Sure.
And I would say the same thing, that if you could be a person on the left who inclines to support the Palestinians in that conflict of Israel and Palestinians. And the reasons aren't because you're anti-Semite. It also could even be the fact that Israel is democratic and conservative.
Yeah.
And they're like us, and they're for freedom. And the
And they're a lot fairer skinned than the rest of the Middle East.
The illiberal mind is authoritarian. The progressive left are authoritarian in their ways. They do not like they don't like America, right?
Right. Yeah.
But we would be careful to say they're racist anti-white because they don't like America. Some of them would be, but that doesn't mean they all are that.
I would be careful to say everyone who goes along with it is racist anti-white. But the amount of racist anti-white sentiment
I'm in agreement with you.
built into the BLM movement is pervasive.
So my critique is when there's an automatic from the right, if you support anything Palestinian and you say so at this time, it may be, like you said, an injudicious time to say this, you shouldn't default to anti-Semitism.
I'm with you on that.
It's too big.
But I haven't heard anybody do that.
I just saw two articles that I felt like nothing in the article has to mean that.
Right.
It could be that they're true.
And it's trying to leverage shame against.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And I think even though it is an effective weapon, it's like the Elijah weapons. Be careful when you use them and use them rarely. The
Elijah
elements
meaning
of
the mockery.
Where's your, those things in a sense that are participate in a little bit of cruelty. There is an okay, God does it, but I think we need to be really careful when we align ourselves with that.
Well, mockery is an interesting one, right? Because it's quite common now. And conservatives have taken it up for sure since Trump's inception. It really transformed it.
That's correct.
But when I think of what an Old Testament prophet does, shame comes to mind.
So there's an appropriateness.
They're out here to shame
I know.
the wicked.
Yeah.
But
so there's another story, though, that Jesus, remember, they're going and Samaritans, and there's this conflict. And the Samaritans are maybe throwing rocks, spitting on them at least. And James and John says, Lord, let us call down lightning on them.
Yeah.
And he says, you don't know. No, you don't know what spirit you're of.
Right.
And I always have thought it's a not common enough reference verse for the right to be careful that they don't live like the left.
Well, the thing I was thinking about is when you take up the mantle of, and maybe this is an overstatement, but I'm going to try it out. If you're going to shame somebody, you better be speaking for God.
Yes, I think that's
you don't get to shame people
for
for no reason.
Yes, I agree with that.
In other words, only a prophet can call down shame.
And then
on
what
someone.
about if I add this to it? And for every 10 people who think they are speaking for God, probably less than 5 of them are. So just take that into
Well, and what you're
consideration.
doing, if you are shaming someone without God's command, is you're taking God's name in vain.
Yes, that's
You're
right.
putting yourself on his
Yeah,
throne.
that's right.
And saying that you stand and judge over the
Yeah,
nations.
that's right. I
That's
agree.
a dangerous thing
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. All right, let me make a quick recommendation. We'll go to our final couple thoughts here.
Okay.
It's my turn to recommend something. I'm going to recommend a book. Can you believe it? It's called The River of Doubt by Candace Millard.
Mike, how many books do you own? I shouldn't ask that.
Yeah,
a lot. Okay.
I'm embarrassed to say so. Candace Millard, it's about Teddy Roosevelt and his
Okay.
two boys, and it's after his presidency, and he goes down because at that time naturalism was still a wealthy person's hobby to track flowers,
Oh,
birds,
yeah.
rocks. The naturalists of the 19th century were in the early parts of the 20th century, and so he was
Yeah.
a naturalist all his life. And very interested in the outdoors and the wildlife. And it was a common thing. And if you were a moneyed person to spend your time as a hobby, I mean, they didn't have
Sketching
TV.
flowers and observing
That's right.
nature. And, yeah.
And people that were amateurs, which is Latin for a lover of this thing, right? They contributed legitimately to science.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway,
well, and this is where the national parks came from.
that's exactly right. Well, he had a big hand to play in national parks himself. So he goes down and does the Amazon. They float.
Oh, yeah.
Float the Willamette. They floated. It's more than floating, but they do the Amazon with the boys, and it's a horrific journey. And he almost dies. One of his sons almost dies, and probably his son contracts a disease,
Malaria, or?
where he does die. As a result of it. They went with him out of loyalty to their father. One of them was wired like him, like dad, to do it,
Yeah.
and one was bookish and not.
Yeah.
But it's almost sad to see that son labor to keep up.
Sure.
And it's the devotion. These are adult sons too, right?
Right. Yeah.
The devotion and love to their father. Now, the reason I think it's an excellent book is all of that. But then there's this one wrinkle that, to me, is the most impactful thing. His wife died at an early age, Roosevelt, and he was struck with grief, and he couldn't get out. May have had depressive components to his own personality.
Sure.
The reason he became a Rough Rider, the reason he threw himself even into national politics, was to run from grief as fast as he could.
Wow.
And he says those things. He writes about it.
Yeah.
And what Millard brings out is that the trip to the Amazon, post-presidency, the highs are, the roller coaster is on, trekking back home here. And so he runs to keep running, and and it's just, anyway, it's a fantastic, and she's an exceptional writer. So there's my plug, The River of Doubt.
Candace
history book.
Millard.
Candace Millard. Okay,
Awesome.
let's do two more things here.
Okay.
The Westminster Declaration, did you see that?
I looked at it briefly.
Did you? What do you think of it?
I think it'll, you ring the bell, it'll fade in a couple minutes, and everyone will forget it.
Speaking of fading in a couple minutes, you know who's faded is Richmond, north of Richland.
Has he?
It is gone.
Oh, I've seen him.
I mean, he's still putting out things.
Yeah.
But the thing that is no more.
Well, he didn't want it. He didn't.
I mean,
he didn't
that's
want the
true.
fame.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I keep an eye on him.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
out doing concerts, and he's writing
Yeah.
songs, and
Yeah.
people singing along.
Yeah.
So he's
I
got
agree.
a fan base.
I agree.
But he never did want to get
Yeah.
into the limelight.
Yeah. So you think the Westminster Declaration is what? Did you look at the signatories?
I didn't get that far, no.
The Declaration basically of we should have free speech.
Right. Misinformation, disinformation. It's a corrupt method to try to manipulate
Yeah.
the narrative.
And you know what? And I'll say even further, because I think they hinted at this but didn't say it outright. Let's talk anti-Semitism. Let's pretend I'm an anti-Semite. Okay?
Okay.
We're just going to pretend that for
All right.
this conversation.
I'm going
know.
to back out of the camera view
I
here
know,
while we do
I-
this.
I thought about it as soon as it's coming out of my mouth. But just for the sake of an argument, hopefully our audience in general likes the way we
We're
talk
late
about
enough
things.
in the episode that everybody's left who
That's
really
true.
hates us.
That's
so.
true. But my point is this. Okay, let's make it another person. We'll make it the person sitting there on the couch. We did have a guest here once sitting
That's
with us.
true. Yeah.
They played chess on their phone, but nevertheless, they were a guest. And watching us. Let's say our guest over there is an anti-Semite. Under freedom of speech and freedom of conscience, doesn't he have a right to have that opinion if he wants to, even if it's grievous, heinous?
Well,
He
freedom of
doesn't have a right
speech
to
means he
follow
has
it
the
up.
right to declare that opinion.
Yeah,
Right?
He can't act on it.
Yeah, this is the
If
early
I-
ACLU, right? That they're going to defend the Illinois Nazis.
Okay,
Right. And they don't do that anymore.
to me, that is an essential, absurd illustration of freedom of speech, and it was not in that outright, but I felt like they put language to such a way that that's what they were saying. You have the freedom to be misinformed,
That's
to
right.
have malinformation. Even if we give you those terms, people have the freedom to click on it, to follow it, to believe it.
Because what you're doing is you're giving an unlimited tool to those who get to define what misinformation
Yes,
is.
that's
It's the
right.
same with hate speech.
Yes.
The only problem with hate speech being a restriction on what you can say is who gets to define hate. And it's guaranteed that the wrong person will be defining hate. And those same people who want hate speech outlawed are in the streets chanting for the Jews to die.
I know.
There's no more talk
I
of hate
know.
speech anymore
I
for
know.
them.
It's utter inconsistency.
And the same thing with the misinformation.
Now,
All
how-
of this, the manifesto has been censored all day on all the major platforms.
Yeah. Yes.
As if it's misinformation.
As
It's
if
not
it's
proven. We can't
that's
look
right.
at it.
That's right.
Same thing.
That's right. So, what do you think, though? Work in this caveat: you can't yell fire in a theater.
Right.
Is there? Here would be the argument. If I'm a leftist, would be this: you can't yell or promote anti-Semitism because it incites violence.
Well, this is the projection they make. It's the same
I know.
argument they make about trans people.
I agree with
If
you.
you don't use their pronouns, they're going to kill themselves.
Yes, that's true.
As if it's your fault.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
lie to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I end up thinking is that because I think it's reasonable, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater or an empty theater. You can't yell in a public place because if it's not a fire, you can't, as a joke, you're liable for punishment.
Yeah, you're
Right?
inciting.
You're inciting a dangerous,
Panic.
unnecessary thing based upon, and here's the thing I think, falsehood. You know
So-
it's falsehood.
Almost every genocide that takes place, the Hutus and the Tutsis, the Jews and the Germans, there was a media element.
Yes, that's
There was
right.
somebody actually almost always on radio in recent, obviously in recent decades, just pounding the drum. We got to kill them. We got to kill them. They're vermin. That's inciting violence. That should be illegal. It is illegal. Yeah.
Well,
But that's not the same as saying, I think so-and-so, this group of people are terrible. And if
yes, that's where I was going to go.
right. And the best example of that is how often in popular media do you hear white people slandered? All the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, that's right.
And the white liberals feel good about it. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I feel better now. You flogged
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, yeah. So would you say that if our person sitting on the couch over here is an anti-Semite and they say, I believe Jews are an inferior human,
Right. Yep.
they have the right to have that opinion. You disagree with it, but they have a right to have opinion.
Yeah, it's a free country.
Would you say they have a right to speak that opinion?
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yep.
Would you say they have a right to say, listen up, everybody, this is what I believe, that's speaking it.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have the right to say the next thing? And we should put them all to death. We should all put them to death.
That's where it's illegal.
Okay, and that's where I tend to go to.
I mean, that's
Because
what literally is illegal
Yes.
today, right now.
Yes.
And that was like when Elon Musk took over Twitter and renamed it X. He said if it's legal, people should be able to put it online. And so that would be the line. If you're breaking a law, and if you don't like it, change the law.
Yeah. There's a difference between having an opinion and calling for the death of another person publicly.
Right.
That's quite different.
And if someone's openly declaring anti-Semitic beliefs, if they're saying Jews are inferior or whatever, whoever,
Let's say Kanye
Make it
West
public.
may have done this.
clearly, right? But now I saw a joke this week of like Kanye, if Kanye had just waited a few months,
Oh my goodness.
everybody would have been on his side.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
It's terrifying as well.
Irony is a powerful tool.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if somebody's declaring racist beliefs of any kind, let's make it public. I think we should know. And that is what, cancel culture, that's what I say. Cancel culture is just church discipline,
Yeah.
right? If someone's
Yeah.
in sin, you call them to repent.
Yeah. All right, let's end up with a little touch on Bible things.
Okay.
Witches. You
Witches.
had something you wanted to say about the witches.
Well,
you
I had a
talked about 'em
follow-on
the other day, but
Yeah, we
follow it
talked
up.
about witchcraft last time, and I got a commenter in there saying, like,
It's not
you
going to
guys,
make
witches
it
aren't
into
real.
our title this time.
Witches aren't real, you guys.
Wait,
Come on, give
somebody
me a break.
said that?
Uh-huh.
Oh, interesting. And we made
They
the
can't hurt you.
specific
You're
point
safe.
to say
Yeah.
they are,
Correct. Yeah.
right?
Well, and I got into a conversation with a friend here in town on Facebook talking about the Salem witch trials, and
Yeah.
he was making the same assumption, which has been a popular assumption.
Well, and there are people
None
who
of
were
those
not
witches, none of those witches in the Salem witch trials were real, and therefore all of the executions were wrong.
So we don't know that, but it's
But
possible.
that's the popular claim,
Yes, it
right?
is.
That's the narrative that gets sold in
Yeah.
public school, and everybody tends to believe, especially if you're not that religious or you haven't really dabbled or
Yeah.
encountered spiritual things.
Yeah,
Halloween's fun and blah blah blah.
yeah.
So here's an interesting story. There was a doctor. This is during the Salem witch trials. So witch trials were not exclusive to Salem, Massachusetts. They were happening all over the east coast of the U.S. and all
in
over Europe.
Yeah, that's right.
And there were towns that were killing almost all of their women.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
There was a doctor who had a patient who was claiming that she was flying on brooms, that she was turning into a werewolf, or maybe her husband was, or all these terrible things, that they were murdering babies, all the stuff, right? And he had a question about it. He didn't think it was real. And so he said, I'm going to come observe you. I'm going to sit by your side, and you're going to do your ritual, and I want to see what happens, because I don't think it's real. And so the ritual was to take these psychedelic ointments and put them on themselves, chants, candles, etc., and then the lady falls asleep. He sits with her. Hours go by. She wakes up. She tells a tale. I walked out of the house. I flew around. I did all the things. And he says, no, I was here with you the whole time. So we were talking about psychedelics as well, right? Mm-hmm. And this idea of how much of witchcraft is a deception as well, that the witches themselves are deceived. They think they're gaining all this power, but in fact, they're just being led down a path to destruction. So, but what's fascinating, because part of that Salem witch trial narrative was that the witches themselves were saying, no, we are doing these things. Many of them were not just confessing under torture. They were openly saying, no, I was under the power of this evil spirit and I did these things. And so there was a lot of evidence that they did. And it was no easy thing. And there was some public hysteria around it too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's never simple, I guess is what I would say.
It's never simple. That's true. And to complicate it even more, one of my favorite people in church histories is Jonathan Edwards, and his wife tells the story about being in the Second Great Awakening, and she believed she was caught up by the Spirit of God and carried across the floor, about 6 inches off the floor, and from one room to another, transported by the Spirit of God in euphoria.
Ecstatic states.
Ecstatic, yeah. Now, interestingly enough, Edwards wrote a book called Religious Affections, in which he argued that the things that accompany revivals and whatnot are genuine and good, but not of the fruit of the Spirit, and they are no sure sign of anything. They can happen to you.
Right.
It doesn't. It is not what God has given to be a sign that He's graciously at work.
Having an encounter, even with
That's
the legitimate presence of God,
That's right.
is not the same as reformation.
That's right. So
Because you're not necessarily reformed
that's right.
just because you saw the light.
That's right. Or experienced something even.
Yeah.
In fact, part of the Hebrews argument in the book of Hebrews is that they've tasted of the age to come, of the powers of the age to come even. So they've experienced something, and the part of the warning there is if you don't commit yourself, if you fall away from following Him and you fall back to Judaism, you're denying everything.
What hope is there for you?
Yeah, there's nothing.
Yeah.
You've lost. In fact, the startling point is there, it's you've gone back on something you can't return to.
Yeah, you've crucified Christ all over again.
That's right. That's right.
Well, that makes me think of where we started, the Matthew Perry story.
I know. I thought the exact same thing.
Where he's having this encounter with God, but did he say,
Yeah.
I surrender all?
Yeah.
Or did he say,
And
thanks
we
for
don't know, right?
thanks for the therapeutic
And
moment.
here's the thing too. In that line, the truth is, without the Bible's giving us certain statements about things, there's a lot of places we wouldn't know, and we would have thought differently. 2 examples. One, the thief on the cross. Just if unless Jesus had said to him, "Today you're with me in paradise," we would have had no warrant to think other than maybe he's turned, maybe he regrets deeply what he
Yeah.
did. We wouldn't have no clue.
Well,
Because
I
of
would say
such limited-
you'd likely assume he went to his destruction.
I think that's where we would go to
Yeah.
as well. And then
And were the disciples listening, or did Jesus tell them after the resurrection that story?
how that came out, how the
Right?
story
Because he
came out.
sat with them for 40 days, telling them, filling them in.
And the women were at the
Man.
cross for at least for quite some time, so somebody could have overheard it. But yeah, the point is we wouldn't know. And if we just had his words, we'd be left in ambiguity.
Yeah.
Ambiguity.
Yeah.
The same one can apply to Lot. Unless we had been told in James, that righteous soul,
Right.
we would have concluded, Lot,
What a mess.
what a mess. He left the inheritance. He could have ridden along on Abraham's coattails,
Yeah.
and he didn't. And he turned his back, and he went to the cities, and he went to evil, and da-da-da. But then we have this other thing that we're told. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think uncertainty in the face of death around someone famous or even someone dear to you that you know is incredibly valuable for humility's sake, that we approach God with fear and trembling. We don't take for granted our salvation and assume. That doesn't mean we're always doubting whether God really loves
Yep,
us,
yep,
right?
Yep.
But the doubt is when we look at ourselves and say, what right do I have to be here? And trust
Yeah.
that he holds us fast.
We'll end with this story here because I had that experience recently. So in my background, a lot of reading the Puritans, John Bunyan, and he writes in Pilgrim's Progress, and then the Christiana's follow up. He has the person of great faith who has Pilgrim himself. When he crosses the river Jordan, he stumbles and he falls, and the waters are deep, and they go up to his neck. He's frightened. He's facing death. He's been faithful. He's had his slips and errors, but he's been faithful. Now there's one that has been with him called no faith or little faith. Little faith.
Little faith.
Little faith walks across.
Which is Jesus' nickname for his disciples. So I'll
That's
just mention
true. It is. Little faith walks along across the Jordan as if it is pebbles, and the water's running quickly over it, and it barely goes up to his ankle. And Bunyan and the Puritans' perspective was that death is a testing, and especially those of faith. The stronger faith, it is more strongly tested that God, in graciousness, often comes to the ones of little faith and eases their passing, which is an interesting idea. So the other day I visit a relative, and I went to the coast and visited my mom, and we were just talking as a parent asked, so how's your diabetes, da-da-da. And I said, my goal is to live to be 70. Anyway, a diabetic's life is limited.
Right.
Type 1 diabetic. And she'd mentioned something I had not even heard before, that you can get a presidential letter if you live to be 70 as a diabetic. Now, that's probably from an earlier day when they didn't have as much technology going on, but it was sobering to hear.
Wow.
And I've thought about it, and I thought maybe I should revise my number to 65. But I'm 54. That's 11 years.
It's not a lot.
That's not very long. And here's what happened. Fear struck through my heart. Fear pierced my heart.
Whoa.
And it's like, I'm going to die.
Unexpectedly, too, right? Just suddenly in this conversation, you're thrown into this question.
Yes, that fear pierces in that moment, but it hangs with me too. And and it's part of it. The reason is because if I was 62 and 70 was 8 years away, I'd probably could. But by bringing it to 65, it's like that's a decade. That is not very long, right? And just the reality. And so I actually asked a couple of the guys that I read Greek with. I talked to them. They're older than me. Does fear? What role does fear play as your age gets bigger?
Yeah.
As you stop counting in decades of potential future. Now none of us know, right? But you still kind of on national average, so to speak, providential average. But fear, and you know what? It reminded me of the story about St. Augustine. So we would think of him as a great man of faith, and I think he was. He pasted the penitential psalms on his ceiling as he dies, and lays in his bed. And he prays the penitential psalms just as an ongoing commitment of his heart, repentance, and faith in God.
Yeah.
Because he's facing, it's going to be it.
It's real.
It's real. So
I sat with my grandpa when he died, and I could feel the same feeling. And I don't know what, it was a feeling in my heart. His body was there, his mind seemed to be gone. You know, he was just basically holding on in the last few hours of his life. So we sat vigil and read the Psalms,
Yeah.
just hour after hour.
Yeah.
And when it was my turn, it seemed every psalm was about death, about God rescuing David from death.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I could feel that I was giving him faith to take that step, because God's judgment is there. It's right there.
It is.
Here
That's
it comes. And I knew just a fraction of some of the things that he did, that he regretted, maybe that he didn't regret enough in his life. He lived a hard life and did some hard things. Yeah. What a leap of faith. It is faith to step into death and
Yeah, that's right.
put it to God, right?
That's right.
Because it's never enough.
And here's the
It's
thing.
never enough what you did.
No, it isn't.
Right.
We know that theologically, but it comes crashing home.
Yeah.
And maybe the tie-in to this as our close is that the witch thing. One of the things that you and I hold in agreement, and I think we're at the 99% level, and that is there's a world that we don't see that's real.
Yep.
And it affects us. It animates our trying. It's really the heartbeat behind on second thought. What's the world assessing tools that we can bring as Christians to the things that we just see and hear?
Yeah.
What else is underneath? What other realities are at play here? Not just motives and whatnot. We try to look at things like that and other reasons. You know, Obama's on the stage again. What's that mean? But there are spiritual dynamics.
Yeah.
And the whole point about the death one is there's a reality we're going to face. But the whole point about the witches one and the occult, it's a real thing. And there is a real, the argument as Christians is not and should not be biblically, these things aren't real.
Right.
Don't be afraid of death. That's a stupid argument.
Right.
Now, by faith, you can trust and you can have courage, but it's a frightening thing, is according to Scripture, to fall into the hands of the living God.
Right.
And according to Scripture, don't practice witchcraft and sorcery. Why? Because it's just a nothing? No.
Yeah.
Because it's a something.
Fearing God and fearing evil, right? You fear evil because they're so evil they could destroy you. But we fear God because he's so good it could destroy you. It's such a different thing.
You're going to go Narnia on me, Mrs. Beaver?
I don't know.
You're not going to do Mrs. Beaver?
I don't know about that.
Aslan, he's powerful. Should we be afraid of him? Oh, no, because he's good.
Oh, he's not a tame lion.
He's not
But he's
tame,
good.
but he's good.
Yeah.
That's right.
Only God is good.
That's right.
That's how good he is.
You've been listening to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke. If you enjoyed this episode, found something to reconsider, we'd encourage you to share it with a friend and start a good conversation. And remember to dig a little deeper and think again.